Counselor Pettingill.
Make a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056E, to discuss a legal matter.
All in favor? Excellent. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, first issue, as you know, we have scheduled our council retreat for Saturday. And since it was scheduled, Councilor Lewiston has indicated he would not be able to be there. Mayor Bouchard has had some issues come up that will keep him from it, and I understand Councilor Marcotte may also not be able to attend. So I wanted to ask if we wanted to go ahead or look at rescheduling that date, because we may have as many as 3 of our 8 elected officials unavailable.
Sure.
Sure, what?
Reschedule.
Reschedule?
Yep.
Yes.
Is that what everybody's?
Might as well.
Yeah.
We can have a full vote.
Okay, well, I'll start trying to take a look. Heather suggested maybe next Thursday, since we're not having a budget meeting. We could at least get started, possibly.
Got plans, Ed.
Ah, okay. I'll send out something to
But
try to
it
get.
should be on our calendars, right? Is it on here?
Next
Yeah.
Thursday, there's it's not on the calendar, that's why he's saying.
Heather has a conflict that night. So I'll get started trying to find another date. Okay, thank you.
Okay, without further ado, we will look at the police department. It begins on page 51.
And I will please notice that even though the deputy chief came dressed with his uniform and sidearm, the chief didn't come in his uniform.
Very professional.
Okay. So the police department had an overall increase of $88,080, or 1.44%. They had 2 new program and services requests. Both of them are for positions. One is a civilian document server at a cost of just a little bit over $55,000. The second position is for a fleet manager and IT coordinator for $68,167. Neither one of those positions have been incorporated in the budget, as a reminder.
Could we get a breakdown from the chief on those, why, and what the impacts might be?
I'd be happy to do that. What we're looking at with the document server is currently we have one document server, and their job description is serving civil documents and also parking enforcement. My parking enforcement officers are 2 part-time parking enforcement officers, and they're not able to qualify to do the civil service processing. So what I'd like to do is not fill those 2 part-time positions and replace them with the one civil document server who will have a dual role. I'd like to have some of my employees be cross-trained so they can fill in when there's illness and people out, so we can address a lot of the parking issues. I think some of you were at the meeting for the parking that we're going over, and a lot of the concerns of the business owners downtown here on Lisbon Street and the surrounding, Main Street and Lincoln Street was enforcement. I mean, they praised the police when they would call and would come, but they would really like more enforcement. And I think by having a full-time civil process server, which is also a parking enforcement position, a full-time position I'll have to better meet the needs of the folks by doing that. And by eliminating the 2 part-time parking enforcement, and I'll actually save money in salary, because I won't be paying this person as much as the 2 part-time employees, and obviously we don't have the fringe benefits for 2, we just have it for 1. So for me, that position really isn't new, it's just kind of shuffling of the deck, and just giving them a new position, a new title, a new job description. So I see a savings there. In terms of the IT, a fleet.
I'm sorry?
Do we have a net on that
I can
position?
get a net. We haven't done that because of the union positions.
Okay.
But just based on salary and what this person would be coming in, you're looking at just a little over $4,000 just in savings in salary by having this one full-time position. I don't have the numbers. I'm sure Heather can get you that for the fringe benefit. The IT fleet manager, those of you who sat on the city council, you know that we often use money to what we call swap overs. When we get new cruisers, we have to switch out the equipment, the lights, the cage, everything, and put it into a new cruiser. The last 2 years, I've spent $19,000 on just the labor, separate from the cost of any time we have to buy new lights or cage or anything like that. The fire department also uses this same company to do the same thing when they have issues to be repaired. And part of the problem with that as well is the only company in this area that does this is up in Rumford. So what I have to do is I have to have 2 police officers, drive 2 cruisers, drive them up to Rumford. We leave 1 cruiser and drive back. The fire chief has to do the same thing in terms of tying up manpower. There's the cost of traveling, the gas, and just savings of the labor involved. My plan would be I have a sergeant who works during the daytime is tied up on dealing with flat tires and oil changes and transmissions and things that break down with these vehicles. And you folks have to remember, this isn't like your car where you drive it to and from work and it sits at work and then it sits in your driveway overnight. These are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's a lot of upkeep that's required of these, and I need to free up. I'd rather have my police officers dealing with police issues as opposed to having my police officers dealing with car issues, flat tires, the transmission is out. In addition, what's happened over the years is there's a lot more equipment inside these cruisers. There are what we call MDTs, mobile data terminals, which are really a laptop to those of you who aren't that knowledgeable of it. We have cruiser cameras that are in there. We have microphones that record traffic stops. Those things are constantly breaking down. It's a matter of dealing with when we're trying to get video that we need to produce for court. You know, we have a server that breaks down. You know, we try to work with our IT department, our MIS department here at the city, but they're pulled in 100 different directions. And my issue is I need those addressed immediately. I can't say, oh, I'll just use a different, you know, cruiser. I mean, I don't have that available to me. What I'm looking for is this IT person would also assist with the cameras that we have in the city. I currently, as the chief of police, am troubleshooting problems with the cameras, with people's computers in the police station. You can see coming, I'll be crawling behind computers and trying to figure out what's wrong with it, you know. So this position would not only be a software, it'd also be hardware in terms of fixing and working on it. I've talked to the fire chief. He has similar issues where he's unable to access or view the cameras that are around his building, which he would like to have access to, but it's a matter of having somebody trained to have somebody do that. I've had to go over to the rec department and assist them in trying to view these cameras. I think you remember probably 2 or 3 months ago, there was a couple of kids broke in. There was a lot of damage to the rec department, to the armory. I, as the chief, have to go over and help them. And I really don't think that's the best use of my time to be doing that. So this would be somebody that could help with the hardware and the software. I've talked to Marcella of the library. She has issues because none of her folks can access the cameras. And they have issues, you know, during the daytime. Somebody will come in and cause a disruption. They'll call the police. A patrol officer will go over, and they'll say, well, it was the guy with the red hat on, and he was sitting over there, and we have a camera, but we can't get you the picture. And the person has walked away, and it would be nice if she could have some folks who could access the camera systems so they could provide that information to the patrol officers who are show up. But currently, they try to call to me or to one of my sergeants, or they call over to MIS, and the process is really dragged out. And it's something that we had a position probably 10 or 12 years ago. We had our own in-house IT person, probably 2008, I think. We eliminated that.
2011.
We eliminated that position. But it was more just an IT, but I'm trying to, as I'm doing with my civil service and parking, is have somebody, you know, who can do a couple different jobs for us at the police department. And in addition, helping out the fire department and helping the library. But I see just by getting this position, I can already save at least close to $20,000 just in labor costs. But this also includes, I have to, you know, send a car up to Rumford. I have to mail stuff. And I have a sergeant who has to crawl into a cruiser with, you know, tools and try to take out, you know, it's really DVD or DVR players, and take those and package them up and ship them out to the company that we use called WatchGuard for our camera system. And it's really not a use of the best use of our time. So in reality, I'm not looking for 2 positions. I'm really looking for this one IT and just kind of a reshuffling for the civil service process server.
So aside from the $20,000 you're paying the company in Rumford, when you send the officers there, is that overtime, regular time?
Well, it's regular time, but I take my community resource team officers, or I take one of my officers off the road, and as you well know, we often have other issues that we'd like to deal with, you know, the speeding and different things like that I can't have them focus on when they're spending the time. And what also happens is the cruisers are tied up a lot longer, meaning I can't use them. So I don't have cruisers to put my patrol officers into patrol, or if we have extra jobs to work details on the road, which brings money into the city. I can't do that because the cruisers aren't here, they're driving around. And so we charge people more when there's a cruiser involved if we work a road detail than if it's just an officer standing there. So there is the savings of that expense as well. And this is a position, if we can get it, that would be a position that I think would be very helpful. I think Councilor Ray came when and she met with my property and evidence manager. I also use him. Now, his job is to make sure evidence is packaged and properly secured, and we have a continuity of evidence, and he also was involved in the handling of the money that we take in, drugs, guns. His role is to focus on that, but oftentimes I have to take him away and say, okay, I need you, yeah, I understand you want to try to wrap up that evidence, but I need you to help us change flat tires. I need you to arrange with Public Works to come get it. And that's not really what his job is. He's evidence and property manager, not a fleet manager. And that's, a third position that really draws away from what they're supposed to be doing.
Councilor Cludier?
So based upon the description you just gave, it sounds like this person would actually be split between 4 city departments. So library, fire, police, and possibly Public Works because of the rec?
Yeah, they would be and help the rec department with their issues, yes.
So would the cost of this position be split between those 4 departments in the budget? And how would that work out, like supervisory-wise, I guess?
Well, I would prefer to have that position under the police department, because I think in terms of the fire chief, in terms of repairs he gets, aren't as great as the police department does with the lights. Because we're constantly, every year, we're rotating out, hopefully, 4 cruisers, and we have to take things out and put them in new cruisers. So, and I don't want to get too technical, but the server for the city cameras are they're locked in the police station, and we limit who can see what. I don't have the rec department able to view cameras that are in an interview room in the police department. So we kind of give people certain rights to that, and I'd like to keep that control, the city. That way we're not having any abuses where people, because you could take a camera, I guess, and try to turn it, point it, and stare it into somebody's apartment. We don't do that. We're looking at intersections. But I'd like to maintain that control over the camera system.
So if anyone within those other 3 departments needed assistance from this IT person, they would contact the police department?
They would contact us, and then we could say, okay,
Schedule
fire
it
department
out.
needs something,
Okay.
go over and help the library. But my hope is, once we have this person and up and running, and then we get people at the library able to access what they need, and the rec department access it. But I can't spend an hour and a half, 2 hours trying to troubleshoot a problem at the rec department or the library as the police chief of Lewiston. And that's unfortunately what sometimes I have to do, because I want people to be able to get what they need, but that's really not the best use of anybody's time.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor LaJoy?
2 questions. One of them, would it be possible to bill those departments for your IT person, that the work can be done to?
We
Like, the
could. I
reason
get
I'm
billed by
asking-
Public Works constantly. I mean,
Well,
if
the
that's...
reason I'm asking you is, like when I was on the fire department, the Public Works bills us for any work that they do.
Yes,
So
they do.
therefore, it shows record keeping, where the money is going. So it's not a total expense on you. Because if the rec department right now calls somebody to come in to do the IT work, they have to pay. Am I correct?
Well, no, because MIS will go over and work on it.
Anyways, so, maybe even the library, but the fact of the matter is there a consistency in regards as to the record keeping, as to much work is being done and any type of revenue coming in to offset your costs? Get what I mean?
Oh, I do. I mean, my intention was not to bill the other departments. My intention was if I could get that position, I'd be more than happy to loan him out to assist the other departments here in the city.
My second question is with everything that you're talking about and the different departments that he would be looking at, your IT person, would he get overloaded over a period of time?
I would hope not. My hope is once he got these other departments up and running, that it would be occasional, because they don't call me every day,
Right.
but they do call me to help them with the camera system.
Just one more, if I may. You mentioned the new cruisers coming in and the swapping of the equipment over. This individual would take care of that?
Yes, he would. That would be part of his role, and, the job description that we have written up is is being familiar with the hardware and the software. So that's, he can type in a program, but also take the back of the computer off and know how to fix it.
On the average, how many cruises do you get a year?
I think what he's asking
Four.
for, he can also change over like the cages and the interior of the cruiser and put all that system in.
Right.
All that computer system that goes into the trunk. He can
Okay.
also do that as well.
Okay,
4,
4.
Yeah.
So I guess.
hopefully 4.
Yeah,
You guys will
may
let
see
me
where
know.
I'm getting at is the fact that you have 4 cruisers that come in, that work has to be done, but yet there's other work that has to be done in other divisions. It's gonna be kind of difficult for that individual to take care of that, or there'll be a backlog.
Well, we get, we get the computer, we get the cruisers in, and then they do the swap over. I mean, and that's, so that's kind of, you're busy for a couple of weeks doing the changeovers, but at that point, I have those cruisers up, and they come into us, and I have to have people drive them up to Rumford. And then they have to drive back, and then we take them over to Marquis to get them lettered, and then, so it's cutting down, the time that they're down, that they're dead is what I'm looking to do. And I can tell you that we did look through the documentation for the city that sent it to this company, and it was between us and the fire department, it was 19 plus, almost $20,000 for the last 2 years.
Yeah, thank you.
Counselor Ray?
Yeah, hi. So thank you, Chief O'Malley, for presenting on this. I obviously heard a lot about it back in December, and what struck me within the fire department was how much cross-training there is, and how that kind of gets into a more dangerous zone with the union contracts if people are taking on new things, and how that cost can add up there. So I just wanted to thank you for thinking about how you can kind of think about parking enforcement differently and make that more comprehensive, but also I think with the fleet manager IT position, you're really thinking creatively about the best use of someone's time where they might be allocated. So I just wanted to thank you for that again.
Thank you.
So the union contract was actually what I was going to ask about. So how does this position work in terms of union contracts? Because if they're doing work
So
for
this would be.
fire, and fire is a different union, how does that?
Well, this would be a new position that would create, and that job description would be,
Okay,
entailing what the work would be of doing the fleet manager work. So this is a new position that isn't there already. And, and I have it listed as a G10 in MSEA. So that would come in, they'd be guided by the MSEA contract in terms of pay and, stuff like that. But we have what the job description is, and that's what the job description would entail doing that work.
okay. So even though you're doing work for,
Well, we have
Departments
MSEA
that are in
'cause
various-
we have MSEA
okay.
people who work here at the city, work over at the police department, the
Okay.
support staff.
First, I think you're being a little bit misled. Probably 85% of this work is going to be at the police department.
Yes.
So it's going to be relatively small amounts of work at other departments, some of which will simply be one-time, teaching people how to access video and from their own cameras. So, and second, most of this work that would be done is now being contracted out. So it's not like we're taking work away from a union position.
No, right. We're paying somebody else. We're paying this company in Rumford right now.
So,
right, yeah, no, I
problem.
wasn't worried about us taking work away from a union position, but I was worried about,
Kristen, think of it like this. First of all, this position's a protect position
Okay.
that we're talking about. Second of all, it essentially is supplying customer service for a public safety initiative. The public safety initiative is the cameras that fall under the police station. Those happen to be internal customers that also have that. So it would be no different than Treasury going out and helping somebody with their credit card machine.
okay.
So that's kind of, the analogy you can use for that. The
I-
bulk of it would reside in the police department because they're running the camera sent
Right.
from their
The server,
housing.
everything is based at our location. They'd just go out on the user end of it to show them what to do and how to use it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, we're doing new positions. Continue, or begin.
Okay. So going back to page 51 for the police administration, we have an overall increase here of $20,620, or 4.12%. 18,000 of that is in personal services, reflecting the contracts and the annual stipends and step increases for that division. We also have a $2,600 increase in contractual services. Telephone makes up about $1,700 of that due to usage in language lines. We have a small increase in 2 repair accounts based upon actual usage. And the cost per copier agreement has gone up in this particular fiscal year. And then the last component is the CALIA accreditation service of about $352. It's based upon the licensing fee for the document server management system that they use through the CALIA program. Supplies had a minor increase of $278, and that's all in gas pricing and tires. For both police and fire, you will see a theme tonight with the gas pricing, because we are seeing that, obviously, as we saw in Public Works, that spillover effect in these other 2 departments that have municipal vehicles that are used a lot. The fixed costs decreased by $450 due to the allocation of the police liability coverage and what we're estimating it's going to cost for the next fiscal year. The Criminal Investigation Division, which starts on page 51 and continues to page 52, had an overall decrease here of $2,300 or 0.18%. That's somewhat misleading for both police, for the CID division and patrol, because those 2 contracts are not settled. So the personal services have the steps built in, they have any stipends that are in the current contract, but they do not reflect settled contracts like all of the other contracts do. So those are built into the salary reserve. So your personal services actually decreased here because of that due to attrition within the wages. We have a slight increase in overtime of about $4,100. Contractual service in this division decreased by $1,200. Probably the highlighted decrease is in the repairs to vehicle of $600. We had a decrease in miscellaneous services based upon cost incurred, and it is an off year for the biennial training for the polygraph examiner. I knew there was another name for it. Its person was not right, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then in this particular case, supplies increased by just under $2,000. $1,400 of that is gasoline. And then the other remaining 5 is in tires. The patrol department, found on page 52, had an overall increase of $39,045 or 1.6%. Personal services increased here by $35,500 or so, given the step increases. But again, no contract settlement for this. We have a $20,000 increase in overtime. We've offset that by a $22,000 credit, and you'll see that in that temporary wage line item. We talked about that during the personal services. That reflects the reimbursements we get for the outside service details that we perform at like the Colisée and so forth. So we're actually budgeting for that this year to reflect that. The contractual services decreased by $3,050. We have increases in training in the academy. We're anticipating at least 3 new officers this year, so that rose by $2,500. And repairs to equipment due to radio maintenance and usage. Those were offset by decrease in repairs to vehicles of $6,150. I attribute that mostly to the new vehicles. We've gotten back to our routine replacement program, so that's definitely saved in this particular category. Supplies, we had an increase of $6,600. $5,700 of that was gasoline. Department apparel also increased by $1,500. And again, that's that anticipating of the 3 new officers, we have to outfit them. It was reduced by decreases in public safety supplies of $500, and that's basically in the amount of ammo that we are purchasing, and that's been kind of pushed over to the drug forfeiture account. As a reminder, he has capital outlay requests through fund balance of 3 cruisers and 2 SUV vehicles, which impacts the patrol account through the fund balance funding source. The support division, which is at the bottom of page 52 and continues on the top of page 53, had an overall increase here of $13,678, or 3.16%. Of that, $14,004 was due to personal services. Again, the bulk of those staffing there are within settled contracts, so you can see that actually reflects the increases in steps in the COLAs. We have a slight decrease in contractual services here of just shy of $800 due to a decrease in maintenance and licensing. We eliminated the Track system. That was a payroll daily time entry system that we were using down there. They've converted to the Munis system, so it allows us to take advantage of the software we already have purchased and just expand its utilization. The police building or station falls right in the middle of page 53. We have an overall increase here of $13,576, or just shy of 16.5%. Cross-charging of wages from from PW rose by $1,300. We had an increase here of contractual service of $12,200, 7 of which reflects the custodial cleaning increase that we saw in the other municipal buildings. The repairs to buildings rose by about $4,300 based upon historical, the elevator and emergency license inspection fees, and doubling up the exchange of the HVAC filters that we saw in the other municipal buildings as well.
Councilor Marco?
In reference to the building, where are we at with the crack that was occurring?
I can answer that. We are, the building is not moving anymore. Actually, Public Works called in a third engineering firm because nobody could really agree. So the most recent information is they basically described it as when the Public Works was scraping down Lisbon Street, we experienced a small earthquake at the police department, and that the building has settled, and they said oftentimes 30 years in or so the ground will settle, and unfortunately when we had the scraping of the road where the whole building was shaking. So they went away from saying now it was going to cost me $60,000 and putting anchors into the building. Their thought process is now as the building has settled, it's not going to move anymore. They've assured me that it's safe for us to, be people inside of it. One of the issues is they're going to build a small retaining wall along part of the building because the foundation is fully exposed. You could take a trowel and dig underneath the building. It's only about 3 or 4 inches that's covered by the dirt, and that's part of the frost heaves as part of the issue. So now they're saying they'll get me a price for the retaining wall, and then we'll just fix the cracks, and we're going to have somebody come in and chisel out the doors, so we have doors that can't shut anymore, which isn't a good thing to have in the police department. And fill in the cracks, and that should take care of it. So that's probably around $10,000 or so. So we went from 10 to 30 to 60, back down to 10. So my hope is that's the final report. What's that?
Stay there.
Yeah.
While we're on that line, I see there's $12,000 left in the budget that's not expended. Is that already planned to be expended, or?
I think that might, is that in the cleaning, under you under?
Repairs to building, under police building.
Yeah, that's going to be part of, because I keep getting billed, so now that this
Okay.
new company, and I haven't gotten those.
We reserved part of fund balance last year
Yeah.
to cover this because we were not quite
We're
sure
not sure
how
what
much
they
it was
were
gonna
gonna-
cost.
Right, but I'm seeing that we had a budget of 26,000, we've had 14,000 expended. Is the other 12 planned to be expended in this fiscal year?
For this purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The animal control officer is the last division within the police department, is on the bottom of page 53. You have an increase here of $3,500, or 3.75%. Pretty much all of that is in personal services based upon contractual increases. And we had a small increase in supplies of just shy of $100 for gasoline. I am happy to say that the Humane Society assessment has locked in for the same rate for, this is at least 5 years straight, if not 6, that they've kept their assessment to us the same, which is obviously definitely beneficial from a a budgetary standpoint.
Councilor Ray?
One thing I thought of afterwards, do you, how do I ask this? I remember when I was at the station that there are additional vehicles. Would those be part of the fleet too? I think it was like emergency response, or is that fire?
Are you talking about part of the hazmat team?
Yes.
Okay, that's different. That's different money. That comes out of Homeland Security money.
Cool, thank you.
Councilor Marco?
We've seen gas and oil a few times. I assume that diesel is also part of that line.
Yes, but they don't, that'll impact fire more so than the police department. The Chargers run on gasoline.
We don't have diesel
Oh, okay.
cruisers.
I thought you meant either.
I was going to say, I thought I had that right.
I thought you meant gas, too.
No, definitely gas, but not diesel.
Since the contract is in,
Yep.
how did your budget numbers compare to the,
We are literally probably 1 cent off in gas to the positive and 1 cent off in diesel to the negative. So we are, I would have liked to have taken a nice journal entry for that, or budget adjustment for you, but at least we don't have to do a negative budget adjustment,
there's
so.
more gas than diesel that's used?
We are looking at, exactly, we are looking at also extending the quantities. The particular company that got the bid for it, this past year let us open the contract or the pricing early. So we may be able to continue, at least extend that, since we still have quantities left at the current pricing, which is much more favorable. On page 54, you have the Drug Enforcement Fund. Again, this is a non-tax-based fund. When you approve drug forfeitures at your city council meeting, typically as part of the consent agenda, that provides the funding for these particular costs and so forth. There are very specific criteria of what can be charged here and must be related to drug remediation. Typically, we're rather conservative on the revenue side. I think for the last 3 years, we've come in ahead of what the budget has projected. You will see there are no personal services charged here. They're either funded through general fund, or if it's for a specific overtime concentration, there are another grant funds that they can use to fund that. So looking at what is charged here, if you look at all the contractual services accounts, and those are those accounts that start with the 4-2. So whenever you see that, that's a contractual service. So we have an overall increase here of $8,751. We have some repairs to buildings of $6,800. We're funding a portion of the training room upgrade through drug enforcement funds to allow us to improve the technology and so forth. We've transferred the undercover phone from general fund to this particular fund in the amount of $564. We've increased drug testing services by about $4,900 based upon utilization. We also had some decreases here. Miscellaneous services shrank by about $1,800 based upon informant activities and leads on lines and so forth. And then we also had a small decrease in training as well. Supplies rose by $28,753. The large portion of that, obviously, is public safety supplies. They're looking at purchasing pretty much all new ballistic gear.
What I'm looking to have, to put in each cruiser that we have out there, a ballistic helmet, and vest, so if the officers have an active shooter, or if there's a barricade subject, this would be something they put over, and it's, some of you may understand, it's for rifle rounds, so it's much stronger than what the officers wear. It's much heavier. They wouldn't wear this all the time, but it'd be for those extreme situations, and I want my officers to be prepared. I think the last time we had a situation where we had to lock down the high school, it was Martell School, and it was a apartment over on Bate Street. My officers were talking about buying this stuff with their own money, that they're that concerned, and unfortunately, I think that's something we have to be prepared for. My hope is they'd never have to put it on, but it'll be available to them. We'll also purchase what are these called ballistic shields. There's something that the officers would hold in front of them. We're going to purchase a couple of those as well, and that's something as a safety issue for the officers that they've been asking for that.
And it also includes the tactical medical kits that kind of go along
Yes, it also have,
with that.
what it would be called is, they call them a go bag. So they'd be in the trunk that also have a medical kit where it has, tourniquet, more of the major traumas, that the officers would have that available for themselves, for another officer, or for someone else who was injured. And that would just clip on to the vest that they would put over their uniform.
So where the public safety supplies in this particular case increased this year, he had a $10,000 decrease in capital outlay. Last year, he had to purchase some, is it the TruNarc? Drug equipment. That was kind of a one-time purchase last year. So it allowed us to offset that savings with the purchase of this year and still not heavily impact general fund. Questions on this? Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Adam. So we'll switch over to fire and bring our next chief up here. Our next Chief Brian.
The other Brian.
So fires.
I will tell you all that autofill on Outlook is creating massive difficulties for me.
We've heard there's a forwarding service between
Yes,
the
there
two.
is between the police chief and the fire chief, because for some reason, the police chief always gets top billing when I type Brian, so.
Because O'Malley comes for stuff here.
You need a nickname for one of them.
So the fire budget begins on page 55. They had 2 new requests for programs and services this year. One was for a battalion chief, which includes the vehicle, total cost all in, includes the vehicle, uniform, cell phone, so forth, at just under $164,000. He's also requesting a new records management system that includes the fire way of providing information on inspections, training records, equipment, and so forth. That has a cost of about $10,000. One thing I would suggest for consideration, and we could put it on the list if the council is amenable, this would qualify for fund balance purchase. However, it would probably require an annual maintenance and licensing after this that would directly impact general fund, but the actual purchase of the software qualifies for that funding source.
So first, before we get into these two, could you share how you may utilize the position we were talking about in PD for the MIS?
Certainly. We already have our own maintenance individual who does all of our mechanics and those type of things. Some of our big things are upkeep of our MDT systems. We consistently, they're outdated. We have issues with them going down. Some of our computer systems. So that person we would be able to utilize often enough to come over to make sure that our MDTs are working appropriately, up to date, software's being installed correctly, the downtime, being able to utilize installation of apps that will assist us be more efficient in our public safety response. So there's numerous things that we can do with that, as well as some of that contract services. I don't have it broken down by necessarily hours of work, but we've spent in the last 2 years a little over $18,000 in contract work, for the lights and the radios being put in Rumford. We have we would be able to use them, in a multi-pronged approach with that same position. So it would benefit, would certainly benefit us as well.
Questions on that position for
Can
the
you
chief?
clarify what MDT is?
Yeah, the mobile data terminal, those are all the computers in the trucks.
Yep.
That we have all the software put on, gets information brought in from dispatch and other traffic tracking and mapping software, those kind of things.
You have a maintenance individual
Yes, sir.
currently. Would he be helping the IT individual
That is,
with regards to installing lights and stuff like that, which would not be computerized?
no, he would do what is encompassed in his job, which some of those things aren't necessarily part of his job, where this new position would be able to take those things, where he would stop
Right.
Where this new position would kind of take over for the PD and assist us with those. So we don't have to have that time, with vehicles up there and staff time up there, going to Rumford or contracting those services out.
So with your record management system, the upfront cost apparently can be done through fund balance. Is there a yearly fee currently for the record management system that you have?
Yes, there is. It's, the record management system itself is about $10,245.
And what's the cost of the new record management system if we were to switch?
The first year cost is $10,108, and the recurring year cost is $8,125. And just looking at, we would also still need to have some of the current system we have. We would be able to offset the cost a bit by decreasing some of the modules we're currently using that are completely inefficient and don't work for us whatsoever. But we still would need a piece of that. But looking at it for our investment, I think ultimately the investment that if we use the $8,000 a year, we would end up making a net impact to the budget of about a little over $2,000. But then doing a return on investment of all the staff time lost just by inefficient record management. For example, just since February 1st, I've spent almost 20 hours just inputting vacation requests. That's 20 hours of my time. So I did a little thing here that between the assistant chief and I, it's costed in kind of unproductive time just doing things that could be streamlined. We're losing about $20,000 worth of time into that piece. We could certainly expect to cut that in half, which would make our return on investment in this software pay off in year one. So it'd be, and that's not even including the time, the lost time of hand searching through maintenance requests, for the hours. So, generally approximated the times, for different staff members. So the captains would be just themselves, just doing their day-to-day, would be about 10 hours a week of their time that, we could cut in half to get, more productivity doing other things that they should be doing. Of maintenance tech of 3 to 5 hours a week. Of fire prevention, just each inspector of 6 hours a week. Because currently our system now, they have to do a paper copy, then they come back and transcribe the paper copy into an Excel spreadsheet. Then the prevention clerk takes the Excel spreadsheet and has to put them into a whole other system. It's just a very convoluted, very inefficient process. And the clerk itself would be, 7 to 10 hours a week. So the cost of just the unproductive time that they could be doing other things was staggering when I kind of did it. So it was, this again would pay for itself right off I would certainly think right off the bat.
Is this something we can put on the list, Heather, to either
Yep.
discuss or see what it looks like? Also, the the MIS position for PD. I'd like to see that come back. Councilor LaJoy.
On the new system that you're projecting to purchase, would you be able to transfer all the historical information from the old system onto the new one?
Well, we don't even have an old system to put onto it. But the information that I have in Excel spreadsheets and those things, we can get loaded into that system.
Yeah, especially inspections and stuff like that.
Yes.
'Cause-
Yep, all our previous runs for the last 10 years.
Right.
All our reporting, so all those will be uploaded. So during the implementation or the planning phase is when we'll have all those different things uploaded into that system as best as we can. Records from assessing and those kind of things for occupancies, those kind of things.
I'm sure that new system would enhance the abilities of the Fire Prevention Bureau with their reporting system as well.
Without a question, we'd be able to track, one of our big issues is availability or allowing other members or other units to have access to that data. Where it's a cloud system, they have access to anybody, all 77 members can have access to this so they can see it before they go out. It's a streamlined process, so everything that's entered will be into a record that can be brought up. It merges into our fire reporting place, and so we can track right now. I would equate it to we shovel data in, but we can't get anything back. Is kind of what so this would certainly streamline a lot of those operations, as well as events, as well as all our training records. There's an inordinate amount of requirements that we have to meet, and being able to, right now, we have to search those by hand back through every records and try to make sure that each thing is being met. Where we can automate that service as we enter the reports themselves and pull out reports and have that data immediately available to anybody looking.
Sounds like we're going to get a pretty good ROI.
I would agree, yes.
Councilor Ray?
I just wanted to check in on training costs for getting everyone up to date with that system. You just said 77 people would have to know it. Does that come with the purchase of the license, or?
Actually, it's a very simple system, and so we can actually do that ourselves during the implementation. As we implement, we'll implement in pieces. Each, or by module, per se. So one would be really function with inspections or occupancies. Another one would be training. So we'd be able to focus the training on specific people. And as we kind of roll it out, we'll kind of train as we go. I have experience with a lot of these systems, so I'm pretty comfortable with being able to set up a system to train that.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Marcotte?
What's the name of the system?
Emergency reporting.
And finally, a battalion chief.
Certainly. Some years ago, I believe it was 2010,
2011.
That due to reductions, a battalion chief position was cut. And that battalion chief was training and inspections. And over the years prior to that, I believe, through reductions, that the job of 6 or 7 administrators has now been brought down to 2. So currently, the assistant chief and I have to absorb overseeing inspections, overseeing all the training implementation, development, the documentation, how are we going to, program development. It's awful cumbersome with that, and it really takes quite a bit of time and stops us from really doing some of the other things we need to be doing. Having this individual would be mostly over training and some personnel. So their specific job would be program development, program implementation, making sure all of our records, for 77 people trying to meet hundreds of hours each of training per year is an immense task. So he'd be able to do that, as well as assist the captains in doing a lot of the day-to-day pieces that in the contract, there's things that captains are responsible for in the day-to-day operation. And when those positions were decreased, that kind of just got folded into the assistant chief and the chief kind of piece. And it's really created an overload. As we kind of get more in the requirements keep increasing, just taking more time and more time to be able to effectively do this. And we're finding that we're way behind the 8 ball. As well as for our inspections. Having somebody in charge of that inspections and being able to focus it and being able to make sure things are getting done appropriately is just more and more difficult. With us going in multiple directions, it's very hard for us to make sure that's as effective as it could be. Our systems are I think are excellent, but certainly not nearly as efficient as they could be, and this would certainly lend to that. I would say with this is that since it does include the car, I would say that we could drop that by $40,000 because we do have a captain's car that's being replaced now. That since this wouldn't be a real emergency necessarily vehicle, it would be kind of a daily driver, that there's a possibility for us to do that as well.
I will add for everybody's benefit that keeping and maintaining training records is really important in the fire service. And periodically, the State Department of Labor comes around and does checks on things. And if you have to go back and look up 77 people and say, did they get this training and this training and this training and this training, and you've screwed up, and people have gotten the training and you've either lost the sign-in sheet or they didn't sign in or you can't find the sign-in sheet, then you're subject to penalty. and to fines from the Department of Labor. So, I mean, it's a hassle all throughout the city for positions that require annual training to maintain those records, but I think it's even more of a burden in the fire department because of the number of requirements that they face compared to average city employees.
Now, your record management system, would that track training as well?
It would be part of that, yes, yes. And one of our things as part of a safety kind of issue for us is that, you know, we want to make sure that we have the top force that's out there, and making sure they're trained appropriately is key to that. And being able to see, okay, it allows us to analyze and to budget appropriately and to plan appropriately, you know, being able to see this data and have, you know, somebody that can focus on this and say, okay, I see we have weaknesses here, we can make sure this gets accomplished, or, you know, something else gets accomplished is you know, a huge benefit to the efficiency of the department as well as the safety of our members. I mean, we owe it to them to give them the best training possible. And at this point, you know, we're not necessarily as efficient as we could be in doing that. So this would, you know, help greatly, you know, having somebody being able to do that.
Councilor Ray?
So on the battalion chief, that is on, what is this, page 18, it's quoted at 163, and 45 of that is the vehicle, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So it's listed at 163.9 on our new program and service requests, and that includes the vehicle, that number?
Yes,
Yes.
Councilor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Cluey?
So, can we put this on the list?
Yep.
And just the discussion about whether to include the vehicle or not to include the vehicle. And then, is the vehicle something that can be purchased with fund balance?
Yes.
Okay, so it's possible to fund the vehicle through fund balance and the position through general fund?
That's correct.
Great.
Councilor Marcotte?
Going back to the software and why I asked about what the product name was, you mentioned that there would be importable information from the old system, and the reason you want the software, obviously, is reporting would be much better than what you currently have. Would that be managed through spreadsheets? Can you import and export through spreadsheets, Microsoft products?
Well, it wouldn't be, we would import them through the spreadsheets, but when we export, we would export them as, it's exported as a database, access database, basically.
Access?
Yeah, but there would be enough reports through it that we wouldn't really be exporting. There's no need to export anything. We would just be, you know, there's over, I believe, 700 and some odd reports that are canned, and that's without us creating any customizable ones that we would do on our own. Which would allow us to pretty much get any data we wanted from that to begin with. But if we want the whole, so for example, if 15 years from now we don't use that software anymore, we would just download it as a database with all its attachments, and we'd have that database back.
To upload into a different...
To upload into something else.
Okay.
And Councilor Marcotte, one of the things that we would look at downloading into another one is his billing for false alarms and those types of things. And the inspection, any kind of, because don't forget, fire has, well, you may not be aware, they have re-inspection fees and canceled inspection fees and so forth. It allows them to, hopefully we can set up their database. So if they go and it triggers that, then it automatically will feed into our municipal billing system. Right now, that is a 100% manual process.
To the budget.
To the budget. On page 55, we have an overall increase in the fire budget of $323,720, or 5.3%. The first division is the Fire Administration Division on page 55, had an increase of $18,400. Due to attrition, we actually had about a $6,700 decrease in salary. All of the increase experienced here was in contractual services. And of the $27,000, $26,900 reflects the telephone stipends that were part of the most recent contract settlement. So that covers the lion's share of the increase. You will see, once we drop down into the communication division, the savings of the pagers comes in that division. We have supplies that decreased by $2,000. Again, that is reflected in departmental apparel of $2,700 for the new chief's uniforms that we purchased last year. And
He hasn't worn them out yet.
yes, and we have increases in gasoline at $500 and supplies, and printing supplies. The firefighting division is at the bottom of page 55 and the top of page 56. Have an overall increase here of $292,000, or 5.32%. Getting hung up on the microphone here. So when we're looking at that, we have personal services that increase by $254,000. Again, part of that was offsetting attrition. We talked about the personnel that have taken advantage of the drop program that reduces their salaries by 15%. So that's tempered some of the contract implementation of the COLAs and the step increases. And we had a minor increase in, when you look at fire in total, a minor increase in overtime of about $39,000. Contractual services increased by $42,500. Of that, $38,500 is all in vehicle repairs. He has some very expensive, or what's becoming routine, very expensive repairs on engine 3, the ladder truck, and engine 6. Those are running about $12,000 to $13,000 per truck.
Which truck is in the LCIP this year?
Engine 3, so that can be reduced if the council gives me the go-ahead that that's moving forward.
And when is the 6 or the ladder truck in the LCIP for a future year?
Yes, those are in future
Both
years.
of them are, okay, thank you.
We do have an increase of $4,000 in training as well. Councilor Marcotte?
With respect to the truck, usually when you replace a truck, one goes into reserve.
That's correct.
And so I would assume 3 would go into reserve.
No, three
is gone?
Yes, 3 would be gone totally. It wouldn't be worth holding in reserve at all.
Three
And it
is
would
a
be
quint.
It's a quint, so it has a
So it's-
ladder attached to it,
And 6 is currently at the central?
central station.
And didn't we just purchase a reserve truck right before we bought the last new truck? I think you
At the moment, we have 2 trucks in reserve,
Correct.
including the red fire truck that we purchased.
that was the tweener truck till the
Yes.
new one got.
That was purchased to carry us through during the period of time when we had the other one totaled and had not yet received the new one.
And mentioning being able to reduce expense if you get a new truck, but how long would it take to get a new truck?
It usually runs about,
10 months.
yeah,
So it would be in fiscal 19, not 20?
yes, because you would conceivably, how we've set this up is knowing, especially if we know in anticipation that it's going to be approved, he can start working on the specs to go out to bid. Once you approve the LCIP, it's fair game to actually obtain the bid, approve the contract. And what we've been doing with our contractors is we prepay the entire truck cost. That saves us about 15% of the cost of the truck. So we do a cash up front on that, and it also pretty much ensures a faster turnaround time in delivery. So we've done that for at least the last 3 trucks that we've bought.
Can we purchase quints through the same joint purchasing
Yes,
group? That would also save time.
Does it need to be a quint?
yes.
Why not the same model that we've bought the last couple of times?
The same model we bought the last couple of times are engines and don't have the ladder.
Okay.
So they're pure engine companies, the last ones we bought, where this quint is a dual model. It covers both. We have a dual utility.
And it would be the same sizing, so it still could fit in the same station?
Yes.
Okay.
Supplies decreased by about $4,300. That comprised of a decrease in apparel cost of about $6,800 due to spare turnout gear that we funded within the current year. And public safety supplies of about $11,693. We moved a lot of those kind of one-time replacement public safety items to be funded through fund balance, so you're not hitting the budgetary line items. And again, we have the increase in gasoline hitting this account, as well as replacement of tires. Between 3 different trucks, I think we need 20 different rear tires. That cost about $11,000, more than we had to replace last year. Fire communication is on page 56. We have an overall decrease here of $6,082, or 8.08%. Personal service increased by $2,300, and then we had the contractual service decrease by about $8,700, and that is the elimination of pagers that we saw the offset for the cell phone stipends. This is the offset to that, where we eliminated the paging budget. And we had some minor fluctuations in supplies. Fire prevention, which is on the bottom of page 56 and in the top of page 57, has an overall increase of $23,747, or 18.43%. Personal services rose by about $22,000 due to step increases over time and the COLA adjustment. We had an increase of $800 in contractual service for additional training. And supplies rose by $954 for additional apparel and tool allotment of $450, and some training material of $550. One of the elements in this training budget, particularly for this, includes training videos. They're rather expensive per unit, but they have a longer shelf life, so that is under consideration to kind of move towards the fund balance. It wouldn't be my first preferential treatment for fund balance, but it does qualify based upon the shelf life.
The hit we took on the steps in COLA, was that due to the fact the contract had been somewhat overdue and not enough had been
Exactly.
encumbered? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the fire station, the budget, which is on the bottom of page 57, had a decrease of about $5,200, or 6%. It was all in contractual services, and that is made up of about $1,700 in an increase in utilities, but we reduced the fuel supplies here of about $63,000, or $100, I should say. I wish it was $63,000. And the outside snow removal, based upon what we've been incurring for the last couple of historical years. And we have a minor decrease of $500 in supplies there for household based upon usage.
Notice that the department requested $38,000 for buildings and structures. What would that have been for?
Yep. That includes we have
Starts with the heat pump.
yeah, you have the heat pump. You also have your mattress and appliances and so forth for staffing of the fire stations, the various fire stations. We have the heat pump. We have lawn repairs for the Lisbon Street. We're looking at replacing the gym floor in the Central Fire Station, carpet replacement at Central, and improving the lights in the bays at Central Station as well. And most of those have been moved over and recommended through fund balance.
As one category?
You will see them all listed as buildings, but they're separated by purpose, so you will see how I just read them off. You will
The
see individual line
mattresses
items
versus-
for that. Yep.
Because some of those sounded like buildings to me, some of them, that's not how I treat them.
Yes. Any other questions on fire, Councilor LaJoy?
Are we putting minimal monies in the buildings, seeing that the plan is to build 3 new substations, just to keep them up to par?
Right, the look at how we've done this, most of the stuff goes to the stations that are kind of last on the list, Central Station. Main Street, we have quite a bit of problems at Main Street, so they need some heat, and having an efficient heat pump that will actually give them the heat and the cooling they need. Currently now, there's some holes in the walls that we're trying to find leaks, and, you know, they didn't have heat the other day, so, you know, this is trying to get that system up right. But most of the others, and, you know, where Lisbon Street is third in line, and Central is the fourth station to be done. So, you know, we didn't put anything into Sabata Street, since that's the first one on the list.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
I think we're good with fire, and we're going to take a 5 to 8 minute break before we dig into the next two.
Okay.
Welcome back. Time for social services.
So, social services is found on page 65. They had one new program and service request. It was an additional position for a field officer at a total of $75,780. The overall social service budget increased by $69,536, or a 6% increase.
Can I ask a question, Heather? Sorry.
Yep.
Not specifically related to social services, but the positions we've been talking about tonight, are any of them reflected in this budget?
None of them.
No, okay, so they'd all be net
Add-ons.
additions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So the administrative part of social services is found on the top of page 65. That had an overall increase of $23,936, or 9.22%. Pretty much all of that, except for $200 were in salary, due to steps, COLAs, things like that. The contractual service makes up the other $184 increase. We had $250 increase in the software maintenance and licensing fee for GA, and that was offset by some other immaterial decreases. The actual general assistance part of the budget, which is on the bottom of page 65, had an overall increase there of $45,600, or 5.1%. As a reminder, right now, the state reimburses 70% of all the general assistance costs. So even though the overall increase is $45,000, the impact on the tax rate is about $13,680. So you can kind of put that relationship in there. And really, there's only two kind of cost drivers that impact this budget. We had a decrease of $5,000 in utilities, and that was offset by a $50,600 increase in rental reimbursements due to the cost of rental rates increasing.
Questions, comments, concerns? Easiest one yet.
Thank you, Sue.
So actually, since we asked for a description of all the other additional positions,
Okay.
can you
Sure.
do that for us as well?
Historically, what we've used the code enforcement department for is if tenants come in and make complaints, we make referrals, or if we know of existing buildings that have code violations and somebody wants to move in, we'll ask code to go out and do an inspection to see if they still exist or not. What's happened recently is that we have unknowingly placed some tenants in posted lead apartment buildings. The landlord has put people in and we weren't aware of them. And the only way we found out was because code had gone out to inspect for some other violations. The other thing that's happening is a couple of landlords are filling in landlord forms incorrectly. They're saying they have a 3-bedroom unit when it's really a 2-bedroom unit, and we aren't finding out again until either the tenant tells us or code goes out to do inspections. And what that does is it means that we're paying more general assistance than we should be paying, because we pay more for a 3-bedroom than we do a 2-bedroom. Actually, in the past month, we've come across 2 illegal units, where one was a whole unit where we were paying money for, and the other one was an illegal bedroom that didn't even fit the size requirements. And again, until code went out, we didn't know anything about that. So I've talked to code and asked if we could have them go out and inspect more, and actually it was Gil's suggestion that I come forward and ask for another person, because they can't handle you know, the load that we're having now, and, you know, we need to go out and inspect the violations and things. We paid rent to 130 buildings just up to now for this fiscal year, and 267 units. So you can imagine what it would be like if we had to go into every single unit or every single building and find out what was going on with the code violations. It used to be that we would get a list from code, a paper list saying these are the buildings that are in violation, so we would know right offhand, we wouldn't pay anything. Then came Energov, and I won't go into that, but So it's difficult to keep up on top of what the code violations are, what the, which buildings are being abated. So we have the S drive now that we have access to, but that's generating reports. We have to keep up on them all the time, because if a tenant is already living in an existing apartment that's posted for lead, they can stay there. However, if the landlord moves in the new person, it's illegal and they can't stay there. So we're keeping track of that. You know, they need to be reported to the state. And then, you know, again, with the code violations, we're just keeping track of reports. We've generated reports now, Excel spreadsheets, which takes a whole lot of time because they need to be updated continually. And, you know, we need someone in the office who can, you know, take care of these reports, who can go out and inspect buildings. And, you know, I see it in collaboration with code enforcement, with the fire department, the police department, because some of these landlords are going to be up for some criminal prosecution because they're doing things that are illegal, not only with the lead, but with saying that, you know, that they have more apartments than they don't, and then they're doing illegal units as well. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's evolving, and we just need another individual in there to take care of things. And we're not against sharing with, you know, whoever we need to share with.
So 2 follow-up questions to some issues that you just raised. One, I'm assuming that when we know a landlord has either purposefully provided bad information, or, you know, we send code over there and there are code violations, that we are not then continuing to place people in that landlord's
We are
buildings?
not. We are not.
We are not, okay.
Code has to do an NOV, which takes a whole lot of time, and they get back to me and they say, okay, X, Y, and Z, these are the violations. Are they benign? Are they harmful? We make a decision, and then we go from there, and then we need to know when they're lifted.
And then, well, I mean, I guess my question is broader than that. So are we not placing them in that apartment, but are we keeping a list of landlords that are like consistently providing us bad information, and then we're not placing them in any of their buildings?
Well, we can't do that. But if they're giving us bad information, what we're doing is we're checking the landlord forms with assessing. We're trying to figure out how many units are in the building, and we ask code to go out and check on their apartments if we know it's a landlord who's not telling the truth consistently.
But if they're a landlord that's not telling the truth consistently, I guess.
If he's giving false information about one building, but he's giving correct information about another building.
Right.
I still have to place tenants in that other building.
Okay. And I guess my follow-up question to that is, you know, what kind of liability does that cause for the city in terms of us placing folks in apartments that have code violations?
Well, once we know about them.
Or lead paint?
Right. So once we know about them, we don't pay for that tenant in that building anymore. So the tenant can either relocate or they can stay there, but if they're going to stay there, we're not going to pay for that. So anytime there's a known code violation and, you know, it's harmful and it can't be fixed immediately, then we're not going to continue to pay for that.
So say we place a child in an apartment that the landlord has knowingly said does not have lead paint, and that child becomes lead poisoned. The liability is 100% on the landlord. The city's not liable for that child's.
I would hope so. We've reported them to the state, so I'm
Lawfully,
hoping.
okay.
Yeah, pretty much as long as we are not aware of it in advance.
Okay,
And as soon as we're aware, we correct the situation.
thank you.
So would this field officer be able to issue notice of violation?
I'm hoping that they would be trained and certified just as a code enforcement officer is.
I do just want to say, though, that for lead, they can't issue a notice of violation for lead paint. They can issue a notice of violation for cracking and peeling paint, but it's not lead-related.
My concern is that we send someone in to inspect an apartment, we find out the apartment's substandard, and then we have to still send our code enforcement officer over afterwards, which would be quite redundant.
Right.
So.
No.
Okay, so this could also, instead of being just something dedicated to social services, we could do this as an additional code enforcement position as well? Or
That-
instead?
Yes, that's correct. I will point out that probably, and it may not be in time for this budget, but in the near future, I think it's on the 12th, Gil is meeting with the Public Health Committee to talk about landlord registration program.
Okay.
And if that program was to be adopted along the lines of what's at least being talked about with a per-unit fee, that would provide a revenue source to potentially add staff to code enforcement. That would allow them to become a little bit more proactive, although they are starting to do more proactive inspections than they have in the past, because we've basically gotten through the crush that came with all of the hazardous abandoned buildings.
And aren't we down one code officer still?
We will be shortly. We're in the process of recruiting for.
Yes, you're down one, boys.
Hmm?
You haven't filled Tom's position.
Right, that was what I was thinking, Tom's.
Yes,
Tom was up.
they're close.
So we're down one currently.
We're down one currently. We have another vacancy coming up, which is also our sanitarian position.
Okay.
So the current vacancy, I think they're getting pretty close to having possible replacement there.
I think an extra position in code, if we can fund it through a, landlord registration, if that works, that would be more my flavor. Council Marcotte?
My question was going to be along the same lines as to which department would this come under the auspices of? And I would actually favor the position residing in code.
Yeah, I think it would make more sense to put a position in code and then to recognize, work out an arrangement with code that,
Yeah, the job description could be
that,
to serve in the various departments.
correct,
Social services would come first.
Yes, that was gonna be my,
yeah, that could
Priority in
easily
there
be done.
for their work, and then the rest.
It really would make more sense to put it all in one department. I mean, Sue's got enough to do, and her people have enough to do dealing with clients in the office than having to supervise any kind of field inspections in an area that they're not all that comfortable with or familiar with.
More than willing to do that, and as long as we have access when we need it.
Yeah.
can we put that on the list, Heather?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Just as a side note on that rental registration program, that is probably going to take some processing time in terms of providing for public comment and making sure that the folks who might be affected by the program are aware of it and have an opportunity to express their views. So I'm not exactly sure how quickly we'd be in a position to implement it, depending on how that process moves forward.
Can I ask, you said that meeting is on April 12th?
I think it's April 12th or 14th or somewhere in there.
So I'm the public health committee
Yes.
person. I can send an email to the council.
That'd be great.
And I'm anticipating that, shortly after the budget process, we'll probably have a preliminary discussion with the council in a workshop
That is the plan.
and get some feedback about how to proceed.
So the next budget is the tax increment financing district, also known as the TIFF district. Excuse me, you will, if you find that on page 39. This particular budget is funded 50% by Walmart's personal property value, as well as another $15,000 or so from the Argo personal property, or the balance of their TIF, to fund specific economic development initiatives. You will notice, kind of looking through here, we had a fund balance that was quite healthy for a while there, and then we started charging personal services and so forth several years ago. As you can see, that with the valuations going down and so forth, and some of the TIFs actually expiring, the funding sources coming into this fund are becoming somewhat more limited. So this fund has an overall decrease here of $15,575 or $73. Revenue is projected to increase by $58,005, but that's contingent upon the tax rate that you settle. And a large majority of that revenue stream goes to pay the debt service associated with the particular TIF district, or the credit enhancement, that giving back or the rebating of taxes for that particular TIF project.
That increased revenue, Heather, is that at the 12 cents? Or the former 51 cent.
the former 51.
So it's
you
going to be a
will-
lot less than 158,000.
Exactly, yes. So that's why I've highlighted that for you. You will notice the personal service portion of this particular fund has decreased by $46,600. This fund has similar wage increases and so forth as other city staff. We have certain positions that have a portion of their salary charged to this. Any related fringe benefits to those positions, we stripped off this current year in FY18, so we were no longer tapping this budget for that. You will notice this year, if you look kind of halfway down the page, there's a whole bunch of blank lines where there were numbers last year. We have pulled all the fringe benefits out of charging this budget for the direct salaries for our full-time equivalents and put those back on general fund to kind of keep this fund healthy and forward-thinking. So that decrease with that personal services, 50,000 of that surrounds the fringe benefits we kept on general fund. Contractual services decreased by $12,175. In the current year with the dissolved LAGC, we were not quite sure what we would need for contractual support services, so we did put money in the current year budget for that. We have not had to utilize that, so that reduced that by about $8,400, along with marketing postage of about $450.
So last year when we eliminated LAEGC funding, Link knows where I'm going with this, because I ask him about it every day since I took office. We authorized the creation of a new position in
That's correct.
economic development, and here we sit 1 year later, and I haven't seen anybody yet. I'm wondering if we could shed some light on where we may be in the hiring process for that new position.
We are about to embark fully upon it. At this point, the Growth Council is settled out. We still have the support of Scott Benson, which was part of the reason for the delay. He's now housed at the Chamber. Misty, with the recent award of the Choice Neighborhoods Grant, a significant portion of her time is going to be devoted to that. Not an entire time, but about half of her time. So I'm up against it at this point. Misty's been in it.
And this is still a position that's primarily, as we talked about last year, going to be marketing for the city of Lewiston, and
Well, I know that's, I'll be.
that was the goal when we
And-
approved it last year.
And I'll be perfectly candid, having been in this business 18 years, just going out knocking on doors, purely straight-up business attraction, you get a very, very, very low return on
I
investment.
agree.
So, in my mind, we would be doing more with Misty. I mean, what she does now is very different from her job description. So I need to rewrite her job description and bring somebody in basically at the same level.
So
Because the
more
funding-
marketing and economic development.
Right. I mean, we could do that, but as far as us, going to Vegas and working the trade show for
Because
for
LAEGC
shopping centers.
was primarily marketing, and that's what I believe we were trying to replace when we redid this
LAGC
position,
was
so we-
primarily acting as a contact for companies from outside of the area who were interested in expanding. That's what Scott's position primarily was designed for. They also suffered from the fact that they didn't have a lot of money. So sometime, the marketing that was done, where we did do things like go to Portland, to Merida and things like that, which can be effective because to some extent our best chance of attracting people to our community come from New England, within the New England area, Portland in particular. So some of that was done jointly between the two communities and LAGC. So we are now thinking about working on, I will also tell you, I was hesitant to fill the position for a while until I saw where this budget was going to end up. I didn't want to bring somebody in January and lay them off in June, because we weren't quite sure on the total impact of all of the contract settlements that we made. So that played into my thinking a little bit. We're in the process now of gearing up. I've got a list of names of people that I've got on, that I want to contact. to see if they might be potentially interested in this position. Largely young folks who are graduating mostly with master's degrees from public management, business, economic backgrounds. So that's the kind of person I think we want to bring in, as someone who may not have as much experience. And of course, we get somebody with experience, we'll certainly look at them, but somebody that can be coming in with a lot of energy and new ideas, maybe. Does that make sense?
Put it down for further conversation.
Fully expected.
And I'll ask you again next week.
As I was sitting in the back, I'm
promise.
like, I know the question I'm going to get for the mayor.
The last category, which is probably the biggest category in this group, is the fixed charges here. That's impacted, you have an increase of $26,000. That's impacted by the credit enhancements at the higher tax rate. So that goes hand in hand. That represents $29,000 of that increase. We have reduction in principal and increase interest on our debt service. It also includes the funding of LA Arts, who Jim's here tonight. I appreciate him taking the time to stay through here. They are asking again. Last year, you might recall, the initial ask or request was $25,000. They came in and asked for a additional $5,000. So we funded them at $30,000 last year, and they are looking at requesting that same amount this year. So it's flat funded. They're looking at having that fund their art walk and administrative costs. It allows them to use our funding as leverage to go after grants and so forth, because the grants are, as you saw with CDBG, are very program driven, and they want to cover actual program costs, not all the fund admin costs that somebody has to bear. So that's what they're looking at it from the budget. I know Jim might want to come up, but I will highlight for him that the art walk is returning to the final Friday of each month. It's going to run from May until October. We are also looking at, or he's developing themes per art walk with dedicated programming for that. I think there's continuing education in the school.
Yes.
And we're looking at, or he's looking at, doing some after-school oil painting classes with Tree Street. So he has a whole bunch of different initiatives that he's looking at. So I will turn that over to him.
Thank you very much, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here. We've had a momentous year at LA Arts, and I think we are on track now. We are thriving. We are expanding our programming, and in several ways, one of which is the arts and education, as Heather mentioned. We've gotten a couple of grants that focus on our moving the arts and education programming out from the schools to the community as a whole. So we're developing programs that do that, and the cultural plan remains a focus of ours, and with collaboration of the Chamber of Commerce, we are applying again this year for the implementation grant from the Arts Commission to implement the various parts of the cultural plan. And I'm open to questions that you have, but I want to point out that we thought we would lose our office space this year because our financial situation was so bad. We did not. We've stayed in the office, and we now are using the ground floor as a gallery space and the basement as a performance space. And so we have developed and started, since the first of this calendar year, we've started concerts once a month, exhibits once a month, poetry readings once a month, and we're about to start film showings once a month. So a rich program of arts in the downtown, and in a space that is accessible to everybody and that allows us to show great art and also to show the art of the school children of this community. So I'll stop there. I could go on endlessly, and you probably have other things you want to do, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
So I don't have a LA Art specific question, but I have a question about, so this would come from the TIFF budget?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's been funded there for several years now.
Yes. So my question is, when we look at the list of items that's on the fund balance sheet, there's a capital contribution to Museum LA on that list, which I'd like to put on our list because I think that's a much bigger conversation for us to have about whether the city should be making capital campaign contributions to any organization and what the process should be around how we choose who we're making those contributions to. But secondly, does LA Arts, is that showing up in the TIFF budget because it was an intergovernmental organization at one point? When we talk about making capital so I guess I'm wondering what's the difference between the contribution to LA Arts versus the contribution to Museum LA, and why would they be paid out of two separate places?
City used to provide the funding for LA Arts out of the operating budget, and at the time when the budget went crunch, during and after the recession, we looked around to see if there were other possible ways to fund the program, and it is an allowable expense. Arts and culture is an allowable expense under this TIF. So we moved it over here so that it would be taken off of the general fund tax rate.
So,
To answer the second part of your question, the capital versus this.
right.
In theory, the capital campaign should be a one-time ask or a two-time ask, and then it's done. LA Arts ask is covering ongoing operating costs.
Okay.
So that would be the distinction between the two funding sources.
Okay. Going back to the capital campaign request, though, we currently do not have a process in place by which people apply for capital campaign funding, correct?
Correct.
I mean, that one organization just kind of showed up in there, I think, because a counselor had asked for it in the past, and it just seems odd to me that we would favor that organization over others without having any kind of application process.
I think one potential difference is that Museum LA is built into our Riverfront Island Master Plan as an essential element of that plan. So, we have recognized it as something that would be beneficial to redeveloping that entire area. Just throw that out for your consideration.
I guess I can understand that argument, given that there's no process in place. I think that's like making an argument for it after the fact. In a way to sort of
I would
legitimize it. So I guess I would like to have that on our list.
It is on the list, and it was put in there as a placeholder to have the discussion, not necessarily to fund
because
it.
Museum LA has requested the opportunity to come and talk to you folks. Originally, they wanted to do that sooner. They were not ready, so it got delayed. So we will make sure they come
April 12th.
April 12th.
I mean, I guess I would just say that if other organizations who are going to be running capital campaigns knew that that was an option, they might also make that request. So are we entertaining those requests? And if so, how are we publicizing that to other organizations? So I feel like we have to have a policy on that before we...
Okay. We can certainly take a look at it. I would tell you that we do from time to time get requests. Most of the requests we get are for operating. We bring those forward as part of the annual budget process, and it's on the schedule here.
On the 12th.
That's on the 12th. We have not historically been approached with a request for a capital campaign. So I think it's something worth discussing. I have been in communities where contributions have been made to capital campaigns. They have been very selective. and often tied in with a larger goal that's beneficial to the community. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Ed.
So I'm very supportive of Museum LA, and I'm not entirely convinced that was all retrospective rationale on your part.
No.
But what I would say is, instead of funding it from the capital, if it's part of the riverfront plan, maybe use the Riverfront Island implementation money for that instead of general fund.
Tax law does not allow us to do that. That's why it's in general fund.
Well then.
And
I tried.
it's
I tried.
not that-
I appreciate that. Sorry to smack it down.
I gave it a try.
It's not at all that I'm against Museum LA. Like, I work with them on a regular basis in my day job, but I just think that by saying we're going to fund that one organization without opening it up to others, we're basically favoring that one organization without having any process in place or rationale for why we're funding that one organization. And it was the same situation when we were talking about how we were going to spend down that CDBG money, and we were just going to, pay for this project at Tree Street without ever opening that up to other organizations to do that. And I think we have to be very transparent in this process.
Councilor Marcotte, did you?
You stole my question, but
Sorry.
just to tag along on that note, could we just reduce the amount that we borrow for the riverfront request and fund it that way? Since it's not borrowed money, it would still come out of the, obviously, out of our operating money.
Yes, although, one way or another, yes, it just now or later over time.
And it would cost us more now rather than spreading it over the course of the loan.
Correct.
I think if we are going to do it without, or in lieu of some kind of process, which I agree we would need to have, I think we would need a very, very solid rationale behind it, as not to slight any other agencies.
And again, that's what I would suggest, that when Museum LA comes in, those are kind of questions you can ask them.
Excellent.
So, thank you, Jim, for coming. I have to brag a little bit. Beth Wheatus in my accounting office is LA Arts' new treasurer, so I'm very proud that she can do some public service agency work.
We're thrilled to have her, as you know. Thank you all very much.
Now it's Lincoln's turn. The CDBG.
Back in the hot seat.
The action plan, this is referenced in the memo. This will be going out. It's on the website, it'll be in the library. This is up for public comment.
This is heavy.
And this is really,
Too big, Lincoln.
I'm sorry, I didn't write that one.
Peanut gallery.
Good evening, I'm Lincoln Jeffers, Director of Development for the city. I've got Pauline Gudis, who is Chair of the Citizen Advisory Committee for the CDBG committee with me, who is, how many years have you been doing this, Pauline?
6.
6. She's been a great asset, has been doing it, she's been chairing it for the last several years, has done a great job. With no real public in the audience, I know it's already been a long night for you. A lot of the early stuff I was going to have here was really explaining the CDBG process. Where we're at, I can sort of move through that and just get to what the recommendations are, or if you prefer, I can repeat. I'm seeing some nodding heads. You'd like to get to the recommendations. Okay.
You have 5 minutes.
And I will say, as I was hearing the comments here with Museum LA, we did have sort of capital campaign contributions as part of our recommendations. But there was a process they went through the committee, which really looked at them in concert with some other ones. I'm going to ask Dave Gudis if he would get my spreadsheet up in here on the spreadsheet on the monitor so you can see that.
So, sorry, before we do that, not to, belabor this issue, but so why are capital campaign contributions showing up as requests for CDBG, but that one capital campaign contribution is showing up in the list for fund balance? And I'm not asking you, I'm asking Ed or Heather.
It showed up out of necessity because we had to spend some money in a big hurry. And it was an available project that qualified. And if we had
No, I'm talking about the capital campaign request for Museum LA. Like, why weren't they told to participate in the CDBG process?
They were made aware of it, and part of it is to be eligible, you really need to be helping us meet consolidated plan goals.
Okay.
And Museum LA really,
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
think would. The two agencies that asked for funding really scored very well.
Okay.
And that they're helping, the consolidated plan goals, which there's 5 of them.
So I guess, again, we're creating a different process for different organizations, and that's not,
So if you
that's
want,
very problematic to me, I guess.
okay, so then make a motion right now or suggest it be taken out of the budget.
I want to have the conversation. I feel like
what
the
I've
council should
suggested.
have the conversation, and I'm not coming at you personally, Ed. I feel like you're, no, I'm really not. I feel like you're getting defensive, but I feel like there needs to be like a consistent process. We can't, I feel like we're funding different things from different places, and we're not creating a consistent process for people to apply for it. I mean, we can't favor one organization over another.
Councilor Cludier, if I could, one thing I will, when we put the budget together, and I put that list together, so I could at least give you my rationale, right, wrong, or otherwise. We knew this request was coming. We didn't want to lose sight of it and not have it anywhere in the budget. So we put it in there as a placeholder to go at least have the discussion, bring it through, whatever process the council wanted to make with that process. But I was afraid if I didn't either put it there or put it on a new program or service, and it did qualify for the fund balance funding, that I would lose sight of it, he would lose sight of it, and you would lose sight of it. And then, 3 months into it, next August, somebody was going to ask for money, and we didn't have it programmed anywhere, and we didn't have it as part of the deliberations in the budget process.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Can I clarify something there? When you're saying have the discussion, you mean have the discussion about that particular request, or have the discussion about all requests?
Well, one of the things that the council can do, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, but is you can leave the amount of money in there and maybe unlabel it and label it as a capital campaign contribution generically, and then develop a program.
And the process behind it.
Exactly.
That
So
is-
that is, if that makes the council feel better, that may be one alternative that they can choose.
Thank you.
I'm done. Thanks. It's all you.
Just to clear, I'm fine. Just to clarify, to be perfectly honest, Museum LA is a great resource for the community. However, it would not have qualified or would not have scored very well for the Community Development Block Grant, and not because it's not a great asset, but according to the consolidated plan that was done 4 years ago, it doesn't meet the criteria. The goal, there's 5 or 6 goals, and they're in the packet, the annual action plan. It wouldn't have fit. Museum LA is not going to help people to transition out of poverty. It's not going to prevent homelessness. It's not going to improve the safety and efficiency of the housing stock. It's not going to reduce lead hazard in housing. It's not going to create more stable and diverse neighborhoods. And it's not going to increase neighborhood pride through investment to infrastructure. And it probably wouldn't promote jobs and economic growth. So it wouldn't score very well. So them applying for this would not have, probably wouldn't have helped them out at all.
And I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that they necessarily, and I feel like we're getting hung up on Museum LA in particular here, and that's not, it's not about Museum LA at all. I guess what I would say is that perhaps what we need is an application process that happens before the CDBG application process, where we're looking at capital campaign requests, and we're saying, okay, here's 5 capital campaign requests we've gotten. Which one of these are eligible for CDBG funding, and then put those applications into the CDBG funding pile, and which ones are not, and how, just a general call, I guess, for capital campaign
Well,
requests.
And with the CDBG, we do put out a request for proposals. Museum LA is on it, the Franco Center's aware of it, every social service agency in town effectively is on it, but we say, here's how we're going to score you. You have to meet the consolidated plan goals, which Pauline just touched lightly upon. And so they sort of look at it and say, I told, Read the Doobie was brutal. I told her no a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, I
Just
think it's
saying,
just,
I'm sorry,
if we're
Rita.
going to have a pile of money set aside,
Yeah.
then that, separate from CDBG, that's great, and figuring out which ones can be funded through, might be funded through CDBG, and then coming back and figuring out where the other ones are going to be funded from, if that's something that we're going to do.
Yep, fair enough. But that's it. These agents, all of them
Yes.
were aware. These two did apply. They scored well, so that's part of our recommendation. One of the things I guess I want to lead with is there was some uncertainty in Congress when I wrote my memo 2 weeks ago. The federal budget has now been approved. There's $305 million more across the country that's in CDBG than there was last year. We don't know what that's going to trickle down to, but we fully expect. Last year we had $805 is what we received last year. We do expect that number is going to be bigger. We just don't know what it is yet. Likewise, home is the other program we're involved with. We're asking you to really approve both our home budget and our CDBG budget. We did that last year. We're going to be a little more explicit this year on it, but we're in a home consortium with Auburn. Home across the country got $412 million more than they got last year. Again, we're likely to see more, but at the end of the day, it's about $150,000 is all we get out of that each year. But those monies can really just be used to support the creation of affordable housing or help people have affordable housing. So getting to the scoring, we've received, I think it was 18 applications, 13 were recommended for funding. The Citizen Advisory Committee, Pauline is on it, Councilor Beam is on it, Sue Sharon is on it, as well as a group of citizens. These folks really do a lot of legwork, really reviewing, interviewing these applications. They read them very, very carefully. They score them. You can get as much as 100 points. There's very few people who actually hit 100 points. You can get up to 35 points for how well you meet consolidated plan goals, 35 points if you're meeting a critical unmet need into the community, or something a little bit lesser. 20 points if you're able to carry it out, and that's really if you've got some experience with federal regulations, because it's a very onerous, cumbersome process. We'll help walk people through, but we can't do that with every agency. So what's the applicant's capacity to act? And then the other is if it's cost effective, are they able to leverage other dollars into this? I should say these recommendations are really what the committee has put forth. They're very thoughtful in coming to them, but ultimately the decision on how these monies are spent is the council's ultimately. Looking at the scoring this year, 13, I think it was 13. We also fund one of the social service agencies. One position in general assistance is funded. So that one's not really even scored because it always was the highest scoring and it hits every criteria under the consolidated plan. So that one position that Sue's looking for in addition, this is one that's funded through CDBG. The other agencies, those who scored 91 or above, we took what their score was, multiplied their ask by the score as a percentage, and then for those that were 91 or above, we multiplied it by 70%. If they scored between 88 and 90, we scored that at 60%, and then the group from 84 to 86 received 50%. The one tweak to that was Healthy Homeworks, which is an organization that is helping people get the skill sets to build beds and get people up off floors. Wonderful organization. It's a brand new organization. We funded them last year. This year, they increased their ask from $25,440 up to $36,004. They were among our better scoring agencies. They got an 89, but when we used that formula I just went through, they would have been getting, that 36,000 times 89% times 60%, they got a lot of money, and it really sucked away a lot of money from other agencies, and they were the only one that really had a significant increase in their ask. So as the committee discussed it, while they were, expanding the program to really make it more of a workforce development initiative as well, the group collectively decided, let's keep them at the same ask they had last year. So their number did change a little bit, and that's really the one and only time in my 8 years really running this program that they've sort of broken with protocol, but I think they were just trying to be as fair and equitable with as many agencies as they could be. You can see the list. Trinity Jubilee was the highest scoring with their food pantry. Seniors Plus, the day shelter also scored very well. Veterans Inc., a homeless shelter for vets that really provides them with additional services, scored well. Healthy Homeworks we just talked about. Workplace literacy, really getting our immigrant population better able to communicate in the workforce. That was another organization. Work Readiness with Lewiston Adult Ed, Safe Voices. You can see the list here. A couple of new agencies were Sandcastle. It has a new program. Pauline, do you recall the details on that, on Sandcastle? I believe it was testing. Jane, do you recall?
Speech therapy.
Speech therapy, thank you. Jane lives in the nuts and bolts of it. So that was a new organization, fully getting funding. Tree Street Youth also was the last agency recommended for funding, and that is on their programming side. And we were capped at 15% of the allocation we received last year, plus the amount of loan payments we get back in. And we always try to stay below our cap at 15%. On this particular one, we were, I think it was 2.3% below the cap. So we had about $3,400 of $3,700. We were 2.3% below the cap. And just in case the program income is not as strong as we like to stay it below there. So we try to put as much money as we can out, but we don't want to get in trouble with HUD, because if we spend more money than we're allowed to, we have to get it from other sources, and we don't want to impact the general fund. On a like note, the administration of this program has a 20% cap. We are well below that. Really, administration is, copier supplies, office supplies, travel, and salaries for the most part. That's $146,830. That was 6.6% below the allocation allowed under just the allocation. If you add the program income, we've got another $50,000 we could spend, but we have not. Housing. We also fund a code position that is specifically targeted to the CDBG target area. They were really instrumental in moving forward with the demolition program and identifying properties. Now they're working very closely, both with general assistance to help them, some of the issues Sue was bringing up, but also helping us identify buildings and how do we bring the buildings that can be saved, brought back up. They're there. They also help with the lead program. There's 100 under housing. There's also 102,279 that is part of the administration of that program. That's other staff salaries and the cost of running the program. We have 25,000 in weatherization going to Community Concepts. That's really used in concert with their weatherization program. But if a building has a bad roof or bad electrical, they can't put the money in. So we use our money to make buildings that would otherwise not be eligible, allow them to use it. And then this year, we can't tell you exactly how the money will be used yet, but we just got notice, and we were celebrating earlier this week, the $1.3 million Choice Planning and Implementation Grant. Last year's council gave us the authorization to go ahead with that, but as part of doing that, we also had to get a commitment for a $237,700 cash match. We're going to be doing this grant over 2 years, so we're asking for half of that money now. We'll do the other half in next year's CDBG budget cycle, and how that money gets spent will really be determined through the planning process. And it doesn't all necessarily need to be spent this year, but we want to make sure we've got the funds available. Infrastructure side, we've got Potvin Park, which we had done a project there a couple of years ago, put in new playground equipment. Now we need to revamp the basketball court, put in benches, trash receptacles, and sort of a watershed feature for the kids. We're recommending $51,000 in funding there. Shane's Inspiration has been on this project for a while. They've gotten $175,000 in CDBG dollars. The equipment, if it's not arrived yet, it is imminently due. But to put that in, there's about $150,000 worth of rubberized surface that needs to be installed. Working with Heather, she had asked, can CDBG fund another chunk of that? And the other $75,000 will be part of the bond request for this year. So CDBG is recommending another $75,000 to go towards that, but I just want to really ask you, as you're looking at the bonding, all this money would be for naught if you do not approve that as part of the bond. We really need to get these things in there, get the first phase of the project done. But that's part of the recommendation. Sophia's house, this is where we get to the infrastructure project. Sophia's house is the former convent tucked over behind Wallace School here. The Center for Women's Wisdom has been working to redevelop that for several years. They want to take that old convent, turn it into 11 housing units. 5 of them will be efficiencies, 6 will be single-room occupancies, and it'll be all women, and it's really to be a place for women coming out of abusive relationships, coming out of prison, coming out of sex trafficking. It's really finding people a safe place to land. They'll provide services. The women living in the efficiencies typically will be older women who will serve as mentors. Sophie's been, they're a program provider. They are not a developer. So they've been working for several years to figure this out. It's going to be a historic rehab. They received a $500,000 grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank. Earlier this year, it's all in. It's just shy of a $1.7 million project. They asked for $150,000. They scored very well under this, and I'm realizing, seeing Councilor Joy looking up, and I'm talking from my notes, not from what's on the screen. There we go. So Center for Women's Wisdom it was recommended for fully funding. Tree Street Youth, they're doing phase 2 of their renovations. This is for the little kid side of the house. They had asked for $150,000 as well. We basically were running out of money at this point. And so they got what was left over. And with the caveat that if we get more money than we expected to, we built this budget based on that $800,800 allocation from last year. So if we get more money, we would recommend that that money go to Tree Street Youth to help them with their capital campaign. Other allocations, we had about $100,000 in contingencies. We talked a little bit about the timeliness with this group, and that's where we cannot have more than 1.5 times the amount we receive at the beginning of the year unspent, including program income that has come in 60 days before the end of the fiscal year. So we are looking to, we've already reallocated some of the money that was in our revolving loan funds. We are looking to move or spend some of this money. Planning for the year, we expect we'll have about $300,000 that will go into our downtown life safety facade and loan programs down there. We have $71,000 in lead loans that we'll be using to help meet the ledge match. And then we'll have another $70,000 for weatherization and lead work, and we'll also have about $125,000 going out in rehabilitation loans for 1 to 4 unit properties. Another budget I'd like to show you is the home budget, and again, this is much more restricted. We cannot use it for as broad of, it's really for either creating new affordable housing, helping low-income homeowners stay in their homes or improve their homes. We have an emergency loan program. But as I say, we get about $150,000 annually from this. The funds from year to year can be reallocated. So when you look at the blue column here, that is how we would recommend, the committee would recommend that this be spent. There's about $13,000 just in administration costs. There would be $36,000, just shy of $36,500, going to the home buyer assistance program that really provides a match, a 5-to-1 match for people saving for their down payment and closing costs. There's a rehab program that we're recommending at $96,760. That's to help homeowners, those low-income homeowners, fix up their units. 6 homeowners, $15,000 per unit. There's a security deposit program that we spend about $18,000 or so a year. We're recommending $19,000 this year to keep that well. Tenet of that really helps people who are either homeless or at risk for homelessness. And then we've got a new program that is really modeled after something they did in Auburn. I remember reading it in the paper several months ago. Thought it was a great program. Jane Yoakum on my staff picked it up and really worked with the program, has talked to the schools. And it's a program that will allow families that are at risk of becoming homeless, and you have kids move from school to school to school. This will be a program that works like Section 8 certificates. It would be limited to 2 years, but it'll be really working with general assistance in the schools to find families that are at risk for this, provide them support for 2 years to bring some stability to the families. With that, I'm ready for questions.
Council Cludier?
So, a couple questions. Going back to capital campaigns, just kidding.
Listen, I'm not saying anything.
Under the choice neighborhood match, we've got the requested amount and then we've got the recommendation. I just want to make sure that, well, I'm wondering what the difference is, and then I just want to make sure that the recommendation meets the match amount that is required. Or if it doesn't, is it because they're getting it from somewhere else?
It was written, well, it was a $237,500 match. So we're saying we're doing it over 2 years. We just cut it in half.
Okay, so do we know why the request was at 132 versus the 118?
I think it came in, and I think we just, it came in wrong, I guess is what,
Okay.
I'm not sure why, no, we said, we gotta meet this thing, we have no choice, we committed to it, but let's
Okay.
do it in
So
2
that,
years.
okay, so that will meet the need then.
Yes.
And then, secondly, I just want to thank Pauline and the committee for their work, good work again. I know it's hard to take a relatively small amount of money and try and divide it up amongst a bunch of really sort of worthwhile projects. And so I appreciate the work that you guys do.
Thank you.
Councilor Marcotte?
Yes, could you explain what Tedford Housing is?
Tedford Housing is a permanent homeless shelter. It provides people who are homeless, gives them a home, and instead of it being a shelter they need to go in and out of, it actually gives them a stable house. They don't have to leave. It's an apartment. They have it. They can live there until they find a better living situation. The program that we fund is really supportive services to those folks who help them get out of homelessness. Instead of just sort of landing and saying, I don't know what to do, they connect people to job training, to a whole host of services.
Because I see they didn't make the cut this year. So last year they received $3,465, and this year they're slated to receive nothing.
And that's one of the toughest ones, because honestly, we asked them to come to town. And they have asked for funding each year, and some years they get it, some years they don't. And this really comes back to there's only a limited number of dollars.
If I might add, Mike, and I don't want to incur the wrath of the city administrator or the financial director, is that there would be a lot more money to spread out among these social service agencies if the city council would pay for a GA person. Almost $58,500 pays for a GA employee for a case manager, Sue Sharon. And if the city picked up that tab out of the general fund, that would be $58,500 that could go to social service agencies that could use the money. But we can only use 15%, and there's no reason, and it was discussed several years ago when Nate Libby was on the Community Development Block Grant. We should not make city employees come and grovel and be subject to scoring for a position that is greatly needed in the city. So it's basically, we suck it up and we pay for a position that is greatly needed, and therefore other social service agencies that are nonprofits suffer because they don't have access to that money, Mike.
Where are we in that category towards the 15%?
No, we've got $3,774 would take us right to the we'd be out of money. And if we don't get the program income, we'd miss it.
And if we get more money than the 805 that was anticipated, does that change the formula number?
It doesn't change the formula, but the amount of money that would be available would be more.
Would be slightly more.
Would be slightly more. And one other caveat, which I didn't bring up this time, we are funding 13 agencies. HUD would like us to be funding like 9 or 10. So we are always, because there's a lot of administration, a lot of accounting work, a lot of review, auditing work that needs to be done. So we're also doing a dance with everybody. All these agencies are worthwhile organizations, but we've got limited capacity in-house as well.
This one, I would actually favor more so than a couple of the other ones that received increases. So if there's any way we can fund them at last year's number.
It's council's decision, so noted.
I mean, I would just say that we have a committee in place that reviews these applications for a reason, and I am inclined to go with their recommendations.
Councilor Beam?
Yeah, I guess this is a good place for me to hop in. I've done this for 3 years now. I've been part of this committee, and it's really what we do is very transparent because we do use a very not subjective, but what's the other word? Objective, thank you. There is some subjective aspect to it, but for instance, if supports the 5-year strategic plan and its goals. Now, if they can check several places where their organization does that, then we have to decide between 1 and 35 points within that range. So if they have more things that they do to support that goal, they get more points. And that's where the subjectivity comes in, because do you give them like, and Nate Libby actually made that a lot easier too, a couple of years ago, where he actually put, if it meets one goal that's extremely helpful to the community, meets, you go down the list, you can have a certain number of points, meets 2 goals that are extremely valuable to the community, and meets 1 goal that is less valuable, and it just gives a guideline for points. I hope I'm explaining this correctly, but I did want you to know that it's really, really, you really have to look at each application very thoroughly and spend a lot of time on each application. Also, we had this year, we had every single organization that applied for a loan, besides making an extremely comprehensive request, filling out a request, they also came and gave a presentation on the things that they do. So we didn't decide what goals they met. They decided what goals they met. And some organizations would check off 1 goal among how many, maybe 50 goals in all. Some would have 3 or 4 or more. And we reminded them that it was really important to look at those goals very carefully. And if they met some of those goals, to please indicate that, why they could check it off. It was agonizing. It's terrible to take an organization. All these organizations were worthy of getting everything they asked for, but the money's limited, and we did go about it in a objective way with some subjectivity and thought behind it, and we all discussed it. We would go home and we'd hear the organization's presentation. Then we would go home and each of us would fill out our little form individually. So it wasn't like we were being influenced by other people. And then in the office, it was added up, and I don't know how you guys
Yeah,
got to one.
exactly. I would get everybody's scores, I would average them, and really, the scoring has improved over the years, as Councilor Beaman noted, sort of giving some direction on how you should score these folks, but then sort of that nuance of, it was like, well, everybody, we just went 70, 60, 50, or whatever the percentage was. It's like, look, if you're somebody who gets 90 and somebody gets 95, the person who scored 95 should get more than the person who only got a score of 90, because they're getting closer. So I feel pretty good about the scoring at this point. It's kind of gotten dialed in over the last 6, 7 years.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking when you see an organization that's doing really great stuff that you can't fund because the money isn't there. But I'm comfortable with the way we reached our decisions, and a lot of thought was given by every single member, because we all have to hand in our own personal. And according to Link, you felt like most people were kind of in the ballpark.
It was pretty consistent.
I got scared the first time I did it, because I didn't want to be, the first form I filled out, there were 5 organizations, and they all got hundreds. I thought, no, I don't think this is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So I had to,
we need a little distinction here.
so I had to, that's how hard it is. You just want to say yes, 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 yes. And so I went back and really, really thought through those guidelines, and got my scores on there. And but I said, Lincoln, if I'm way off, please tell me that I'm not doing this right. And no, you said, like, I was kind of in the ballpark of what everybody else had put. So it seems to be working, because otherwise you'd have people all over the place. Sometimes you get an outlier, I guess.
Well, and we address them. We talk about the outliers.
Yeah. So it's really hard, and that was one of the ones that I looked at too, and felt terrible about. But I think this is as good as it can be. Well, maybe we could improve, but it's a good process, I think, a fair process.
Just if you could take just one moment, Link, we know Mrs. Goodis is a planning board rep, and Councilor Beam is on the committee. If you just want to quickly recognize everyone else on the committee.
Everybody else on the committee. We've got Sue Sharon, who's the administration rep for the city. We have Sarah Goodrich, who's also been on the committee for 6 or 7 years. We have Jason Lavoie, a young woman named Hawa Abdil, who is brand new this year, and Daniel. David. I always want to call him Daniel. It's David Nielsen, Jr. are the committee members, and they all stepped right up, jumped right in, and got it. So, I mean, it was really a very good committee this year. It was good conversations, and people were diligent in doing their work.
Excellent. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe we are done. Good? You guys good? All right. Everybody have a wonderful night. Let me bang this for you. All right. There.